Our sanitation certification, AGA, our gas certification, are all independent agencies of the U.S. government. So, as the technocrats in China manage trade, the CCC mark has been a huge tool for them in order to prevent products like the KitchenAid brand from successfully selling millions of dollars of product in China. And that is a first-hand experience.
Bill, let's talk about currency revaluation. Should the United States be putting more pressure on China to make better time in addressing that problem?
I think the United States is putting the proper amount of pressure on China.
Well, it hasn't worked yet, has it?
It hasn't. Well, there has been some progress. There has been some progress. It's slower than a lot of our people would like it to be. But I think that we also have to realize the disruption in the Chinese economy if it were to move too fast. And I'm not saying that I am more interested in the Chinese economy necessarily and Chinese workers than I am in American workers. But we have to consider that. And I think some of our more aggressive legislators, and I'm quoting some other folks when I say this, don't always take into consideration the negative ramifications of revaluing that currency too quickly.
How many of you here in the export business think there should be more pressure on China to get straight with its currency system? See some hands. Richard, where do you fall on this?
Well, you say there should be more pressure. How do we know it works? If they cave in, then it works. If they don't cave in, then it doesn't work.
Or they cave in too slowly.
Or if they cave in too slowly. Since we're talking more about politics than economics in some ways, all politics are local. And we're concerned about our local interests here in the United States. Beijing has interests, and I'm not an apologist for it, is concerned about its local politics in China. And if we think we're simply going to roll over because we make a lot of noise about it, then we're smoking some bad marijuana.
It's not that I want to pick up on the marijuana.
I wonder.
I think I appreciate Richard's point on that, but it is very tied with economics for China. And that, 700 million people living on $1 a day, Trevor will correct me on that, but it's something to that effect. And if you have a disruption in the economy, and people not even making their $1 a day, this is going to have a huge effect on the world economy.
Yeah, but it comes back to politics. They want stability. They don't want people upset.
But let's not underestimate the power of the U.S. government and our economy. I mean, this is our economy. This is not their economy. When we had this problem with Japan at the end of the 80s, I was there. I was living there in Tokyo. And almost overnight, the yen went from 250 to 120. In other words, the dollar appreciated by about 50%. So, we have the power in order to get this done.
Remember, once again, same format. If you have questions, find yourself a microphone and we'll get to you. Go ahead, Bill.
I just wanted to remark on that statement, and it came up earlier today. One of our speakers had mentioned that we do have a lot of power. However, it really is a two-way game. And sometimes we don't realize how important the Chinese point of view and the Chinese economy and that country is. And sometimes we feel we can just go in there and change things like that. I agree we need to remain engaged and we need to keep the pressure on, but we can't expect it to be unilateral.
Trevor, what you know about China, how do you think Beijing would react if all of a sudden we escalated our pressure on their currency system?
I mean, I think that there's, first it's important to differentiate what we actually expect to happen if they did. Are we seeking, I would agree that the renminbi is probably undervalued and make the case to the Chinese that it should be revalued for China's sake. But the illusion that a revaluation of the renminbi would solve the U.S. trade deficit is totally illusionary, right? I mean, just think of all the countries that run a trade surplus with China: Japan, South Korea, Germany. Germany with the euro, which is now 150 to the U.S. dollar, runs a significant trade surplus, right? So it's not just a matter of the currency. And what about the 2/3 of the U.S. trade deficit that's not with China? That's with the rest of the world. So it's easy to say the reason we have a trade deficit globally is because China keeps its currency. We're the other half of that equation, right? The easiest way to stop the U.S. trade deficit would just be to consume less and invest more. I mean, it would be stopped like that. The growth in our trade deficit with OPEC, right, is greater than the growth in our trade deficit with China.
I don't think there's a lack of resolve on the part of either Democratic or Republican administrations. They've all worked this issue over the last 10, 15 years with China. It's just, it's complex. China has $1 trillion invested in the United States. And it's not something that is so overt that for them to threaten to pull it all out. It's just that they started investing less in treasuries and other instruments in the United States. There's an impact here. Even the government understands it. Plus, many of the goods coming from China to the United States are coming from American companies that are located here. And those companies aren't going to be raising a hue and cry.
Question here.
I'm already into the Orlando U.S. Export Assistance Center again. The CE and CE mark stands for Conformité Européenne, and it basically shows that your company's products have conformed to European standards. I understand the CCC mark is a Chinese adaptation of the CE mark. You were saying that it's a non-tariff barrier to trade. Could you explain a little bit how that's different from the CE mark, and if you were just maybe being tongue-in-cheek in that, or if you were literal, that that's actually truly a non-tariff barrier to trade?
We don't deal in tongue-in-cheek up here. Either that rate laughs or nothing else.
Well, one of the big areas, one of the many big areas that we're working on advocacy in China is in standards. And whether inadvertent or not, there are so many areas, so many industries in China that have standards that are not international standards, and the CCC mark can, to some extent, be an example of that, where a standard is set which doesn't conform with in some cases, any standard anywhere else in the world. So, is that a trade barrier? It seems like it would be a trade barrier. If you're manufacturing a good product which is accepted almost anywhere else except for China, because it's not the same standard that China will set.
Bill, I've done some work with the electrical industry recently, and they say that an enormous problem is counterfeit branding of items and counterfeit UL marks coming out of China. They point out that you can hardly buy an extension wire in the United States these days that is not made in China, and they said many of those UL marks are simply counterfeit. Have we simply accepted China as this huge trading partner without giving enough thought to its missing infrastructure when it comes to things like safety and product quality?
The short answer would be no. We are trying to address it all the time. I think that it's a constant battle addressing the IP violations, the intellectual property rights violations in China. In the Commerce Department, of course, we have the Patent and Trade Organization. A lot of this is education not only for our Chinese friends, but also for our American folks. We have people in China from Patent and Trade Office. But this is an enormous issue. We're doing our best to address it, and it's a continual problem.
Neal, did you have something you want on this? I saw you shaking your head over there.
You know, the trademark issue is a huge deal, and part of that is, in order to get the CCC mark, the Chinese government requires all sorts of sensitive information, product information, design information, the way things are made in great detail. This has to be submitted to a Chinese ministry. Whether they have bad intentions or good intentions, we can, debate that endlessly. But I can tell you, somebody making $2 or $3 a day, who's got the designs of a product from Whirlpool that cost them millions and millions of dollars to come up with, can very easily be downloaded in nanoseconds and turned over to the Chinese competitors. But that's the cost of getting into the market.
Rick?
In fairness, a couple of months ago,